Again, we are in a new hour here on Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Christina Evans. We do want to continue on with those top stories that we're following. I want to take you out to this live vantage point that we have there in London. Of course, this is the news that was really heard all around the world this morning, as we did find out that the former Prince Andrew, now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, was arrested today for suspected misconduct in public office. This is all after revelations came out in the Jeffrey Epstein files. And so to talk a lot more about what we're seeing here, I do want to bring into the conversation live there in London. I want to bring in Stephanie Bennett. Stephanie, thanks so much for joining us. A lot to uncover here as former Prince Andrew has been arrested.
Yeah, good afternoon. That is exactly right. The shock of all of this and also the urgency. This, of course, was an arrest. It wasn't, come on down to the police station, let's have a talk, let's do some interview questions. So that is quite shocking in itself. And just here outside of Buckingham Palace, there are so many other journalists here that are lined up covering this for the world. Now, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, he was arrested at his home around 8 a.m. local time this morning on the Sandringham estate. We heard it was from unmarked police cars and, plainclothes officers carried this out. Police searching his home and also his former address, the Royal Lodge in Windsor, where he lived, of course, last year before being stripped of his royal titles. Now, of course, he was arrested and is in custody on suspicion of misconduct in public office. It comes after the Thames Valley Police said they were investigating claims that Andrew shared confidential government documents with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein while serving as UK trade envoy in 2010. King Charles III, he released a statement early this morning saying in part, of course, the king is Andrew's older brother, that is. Now, he said in part, quote, "What now follows is the full, fair and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. In this, as I have said before, they have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course." Now, we also heard that Prince William and his wife Catherine are understood to also support the king's remarks. Now, for the king and the queen, they actually carried on as usual despite all of this that happened this morning. They had a busy itinerary today. Their work continues on. The king attended a London Fashion Week event earlier, and while Queen Camilla was at Westminster for an orchestra event. Now, Andrew and the royal family, of course, have long been plagued by his alleged dealings with Epstein. He was also accused of sexual misconduct by Virginia Roberts Guffrey. Her family released a statement earlier saying in part, "At last today our broken hearts have been lifted at the news that no one is above the law, not even royalty," despite this current arrest not having anything to deal with that case, of course. But what's also interesting is this all happening today on Andrew's 66th birthday. Back to you.
All right, we certainly appreciate Stephanie Bennett with Fox News for giving us that update live there from London. And we want to continue this conversation. I now want to bring in Josh Rahm. He's a London-based journalist to talk a little bit more about what led up to this arrest. Stephanie, thank you so much for your time. Josh, I want to transition over to you now. I have to ask you, as we're watching this all unfold, did you see this coming in any sort of sense? Has this build-up been something that folks there in London have been watching?
But it isn't actually that surprising. There's been talk for a long time, especially since the 3 million or so documents were released in the Epstein files, about potential misconduct from a number of public figures. Of course, British politician Peter Mandelson as well being caught up in it. As well, there's been talk about potential misconduct for him, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. His judgment has come under fire. There was a bit of a crisis. Questions were being asked whether he would even remain in office. So when Andrew was kind of caught up in this, I think there's been kind of speak and as journalists have dug deeper into the documents, we've seen that more allegations, more accusations have come to light. Bearing in mind, we know that up to 9 different police forces have been investigating the Epstein files of misconduct and wrongdoing, especially when it came to Prince Andrew's role as trade envoy and accusations that he may or may not have shared sensitive information, UK government secrets, with the disgraced paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein, which could have been seen to be in Jeffrey Epstein's benefit. So I think, although, yes, this is a stunning development, it isn't that surprising to us who have been following the story.
And so we're taking a look at some of these photos as well of the former Prince Andrew. I have to ask you, Josh, here, as we're watching this all unfold, we do know, you mentioned it was 6 unmarked police vehicles that were seen at arriving at Wood Farm. That's Andrew's new residence. What can you tell me about this place that he has been staying since he has been stripped of his royal titles?
Yes, well, of course, when he was stripped of his royal titles and the style of prince in a pretty much unprecedented move by His Majesty the King, he was effectively evicted from his main residence, Royal Lodge in Windsor Park, this grand mansion, this 30-room mansion on the Windsor Park estate, this huge royal privilege. He was stripped from that. So he's currently residing in Wood Farm, a significantly smaller property on the Sandringham estate, which was actually the former home of his late father, Prince Philip, the former Duke of Edinburgh, before he moves to his more permanent residence of Marsh Farm on the Windsor estate. What we know, Sandringham, yes, is one of the big estates that comes under the royal portfolio, so to speak, but it's not publicly owned. Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle come under these public, they're very much the public positions, the public estates. But Sandringham and Balmoral are private estates. So we know that Prince Andrew's accommodation, this house that he's staying in, whilst it is still relatively luxurious, it's been described very much as a villa. It's not necessarily small by any means. It's not this big, huge royal mansion that he's been known to be residing at on the Windsor Park estate. Bearing in mind, he was only paying a peppercorn rent, which is basically nearly nothing, on that Royal Lodge estate in Windsor Park. So the Wood Farm that he's been staying at is a far cry from Royal Lodge in Windsor. But what we do know is that this is accommodation being funded privately by the king in a family capacity. And I want to go back to the king's statement earlier, what he issued after Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was arrested, because what he was basically saying is he is saying that the authorities have their full support and they will cooperate fully with any sort of investigation. And what the king said is the law must take its course. But what, reading between the lines, what he is also saying is Andrew now is no longer a royal. He's no longer Prince Andrew. He is simply Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He is now a private citizen, and there is no royal protection that he will be getting from that. And if they have to let the authorities in to investigate any sort of part of the institution, His Majesty the King will do that. They will cooperate. That's effectively what the statement is. The statement saying the law must take its course, and nobody, including Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is above the law.
And so as we're looking at that statement, I'm glad you pointed that out, because we also heard from the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. He spoke with BBC saying that, again, no one is above the law in this case. When it comes to some of the more political side of things and how this interaction happens between the royal family, of course, as you mentioned, former Prince Andrew is no longer considered a working royal since he has lost his titles. But how has that interaction been between the state and some of those political figures, as well as the royal family, in response to Andrew Mountbatten and some of these allegations that have been happening?
Well, this is a complete shake-up of the entire British establishment. Sir Keir Starmer went on the BBC to say nobody is above the law. And when you've got the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom going on TV and saying stuff like that, that just emphasises the gravity of the entire situation. We know that the government and the institution, the Crown, work in lockstep and in tandem. Britain is a constitutional monarchy. That is our political system. So we've got His Majesty the King, who is the head of this. It is, the government is in the King's name. and he's also the head of the Church of England as well. But the government and the crown work side by side almost in tandem when it comes to this country. But of course, the government is in crisis about this as well with their own political figures. As I said before, Peter Mandelson also coming under investigation. There are rumors that he could be arrested as well. He had to resign from his position in the House of as UK's ambassador to the US, and his position within the House of Lords as well. So this is the entire British political and constitutional establishment has been shaken to its very core by this huge scandal. And I think that's the whole thing about this scandal. We see the absolute web, the tentacles, how far reaching this is. It's not just us here in the UK. We've also seen it being affected by you guys as well across the pond. We see the Clintons going to testify in Congress as well. This is a hugely ranging a scandal that shakes the whole establishment, maybe of not just of Britain, but of the free world to its very core.
Absolutely, Josh. We're continuing to see the fallout as these different batches of the Epstein files are released. And I want to ask you this. Of course, we often think about, when we think about the royal family, a person who's synonymous with it is the late Queen. Of course, we know she really dedicated her entire life and existence to making sure that the royal family continued on there in the UK. We're starting to see some reaction from folks. What have you seen folks talking about as it relates to the Queen and her relationship with Andrew before she passed?
Well, I think the main reaction is that she would be spinning in her grave at this. This would be absolutely devastating for her. We know, or at least it's been very widely reported, that Andrew was the Queen's favourite son, and I think she would be absolutely heartbroken and devastated if she was still alive to see her son, even forget the favourite son speculation, but any senior member of the royal family to be arrested. This is actually the first time a senior member of the royal family has been arrested in modern times. This is an absolutely stunning development. This is a ground-shifting development. This is a momentous day, a stunning news story. The Queen would absolutely be devastated, but I think I think definitely the institution is fearful of what this would say about the Queen's legacy. And I think what is obvious, nobody wants to speak ill of the royal family, but it's very clear that the Queen had a blind spot when it came to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known as Prince Andrew. She potentially, Her late Majesty had a blind spot there. And it's been very widely reported the money used to pay the late Virginia Giuffre in her settlement came from the Queen, then Prince Charles, and even the estate of Prince Philip, the late Duke of Edinburgh as well. So I think we know that Her Majesty had a blind spot here. It's just a devastating day, I think, for the institution, for the crown, for the monarchy. And I think questions are going to be asked now about the institution, because when it came to the previous reporting about girls being ushered into Buckingham Palace, UK airports being used potentially, when it came to the alleged sex trafficking of girls, there's going to be questions asked about the wider institution. What did Buckingham Palace know? What did they know? What didn't they know? Were the Metropolitan Police involved? Did the police protection officers turn any sort of blind eye to any sort of wrongdoing? These are all questions that are going to be asked. Now, it's important to state that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, of course, strenuously denies, and continues to do so, any sort of criminal wrongdoing whatsoever. But something like this is going to be absolutely devastating to the crown, because unfortunately there are going to be more and more instances. Just today, His Majesty the King was asked during his when he was out at a royal engagement, his reaction after his own brother was arrested. The fact that these questions are being asked is absolutely devastating for the royal family, and the Queen would absolutely be devastated by this. And it's very clear that when it came to Andrew, yes, she had a blind spot. But I think what this does show overall Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and his behavior with Jeffrey Epstein, whether or not it is any sort of alleged role in sex trafficking, any sort of association with that, regardless of the fact that he strenuously denies any sort of wrongdoing. The fact that those questions are being asked is a huge stain on the royal family. And then this extra accusation, bearing in mind he hasn't necessarily been charged yet. He's just been arrested, detained, and is currently in police custody, and he will have to answer questions to the authorities. And the fact that 9 different police forces are investigating any sort of behavior links to Jeffrey Epstein in all sorts of manners, that is an absolute stain on not just the British royal family, the British crown, the institution, but actually on the British public, on the whole UK establishment as a whole.
And so we're still watching all of this unfold. I'm glad you brought that up, though, the context around Queen as well as Andrew. And I want to put this up on the screen as well. Ex-Prince Andrew arrested by the UK police, and the report there from the New York Post. But what I really want to point out is some of those pictures that are on the screen as well. These were just released in the latest version of the Epstein files, with this woman's face being redacted. Those are some of the accusations that are in here. Again, not connected to what former Prince Andrew is being charged with at this point. He's not being charged with any sexual crimes. But I do want to put this up from Virginia Giuffre's family. So they are now speaking out in the wake of all of this. Putting this up on the screen for folks at home who may not have seen it, saying, quote this, "At last, today our broken hearts have been lifted at the news that no one is above the law, not even royalty. On behalf of our sister, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, we do extend our gratitude to the UK's Thames Valley Police for their investigation and arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He was never a prince. For survivors everywhere, Virginia did this for you." And so also putting up some of those photos, and we've seen and heard from Virginia over the years with these accusations that she has had against the former prince, speaking out before she ultimately took her own life late last year. So I have to ask you this. Josh, we've been watching the fallout from Virginia's speeches and, again, her since death, and this comment there from the family. Is this something that we would have expected to see and hear from them as the former prince has been taken into custody?
Well, it would be very surprising if the family didn't speak out at all. This is exactly Virginia Giuffre. That's what she, that's probably what she would have wanted. She made a lot of accusations about Andrew, not just publicly when she was alive, but of course in her memoir as well. Quite harrowing accusations, not just about him, but of course about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell as well, and their role in this. But of course, Virginia Giuffre as well. There's still questions about the names. There's still about other names within the Epstein files. Virginia Giuffre, within her deposition, gave up to 40 names. And I think the family have stated they're all there. You just have to look for them. And that's the thing. I think when it comes to this scandal, obviously, we have to think about the victims. I think both when it comes to the royals in particular, the Prince and Princess of Wales released their statement again, emphasizing their thoughts are with the victims or with survivors of sexual assault and of any sort of assault. That was before they went to Saudi Arabia. The king as well released a statement previously before today's arrest, saying again through a spokesperson that their majesties have taken unprecedented actions, and again their thoughts are with the victims and that they would cooperate with any sort of investigation. I think the royal family will continue to refer back to those statements in particular when it comes to any sort of, not allegation, but if they are asked about this, they have that statement to simply go back to and simply refer to, this very pointed statement saying our thoughts are with the victims and we are going to cooperate with any sort of investigation.
And so it'll be something that we're continuing to watch here on Live Now from Fox. And so we certainly appreciate Josh Romm, a London-based journalist, for joining us here to give us the very latest as all of this is unfolding. Josh, so thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much.